My hat's over there, whatever. Hey y'all, Kurt Sasso here from Two Geeks Talking, the entertainment industry interview show where we interview the creative people from the comic, film, TV, movie, and video game industries. And of course, I'm your host, Kurt Sasso, as you can see right here, or wherever the heck it is, somewhere there. There you go. Of course, you can get me on Twitter at Kurt Sasso. You can get us on our website, tgtmedia.com. Our YouTube channel, youtube.com/TGT Media, and of course many other avenues of social media like Facebook and Instagram and everything like that, usually by using my name right as you see it there. We're joined today by a reviewer, a reader of sci-fi, fantasy, action, adventure, and all of these wonderful books are actually under $1 each. It's strange, I know, but it's actually the lost art of reviewing amazing sci-fi novels and everything along that line. You can find his work at Schlock Value, which is schlock-value.com. And we're joined today by Thomas Anderson. How are you doing today, Thomas?
Doing well. How are you doing?
Doing wonderful. Thanks for asking. As I take a sip of water. Of course, a good friend of ours, Stephen Savage, put me on to your site and your work, and in going through your articles and going through your reviews, you're definitely not playing favorites. That's for sure when it comes to sci-fi books of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and for that matter, all of those wonderful books that you happen to find. For those that don't know anything about your passion, tell us what you and your passion are all about.
Well, for me, the big thing has been exploring science fiction, fantasy, whatever, that I wouldn't have read otherwise. I had a realization maybe 2 years ago that most of the works I was reading were by the masters. I would read a lot of Heinlein. I'd read Dune. I've read Dune at least 30 times. And I wasn't learning anything, either as a reader, as a fan, or as potentially a writer. It's all well and good to mimic the people you like, but sometimes it's good to know what to avoid. And so when I started, that was my goal, was to look at forgotten or just awful pieces of work and see where the mistakes were that an author could avoid or invert or revert or whatever the case may be to make their own writing better. And it so happens that I just love science fiction, so that was a natural place to start.
That's awesome. So when did you start saying, you know what, I want to look at these forgotten authors that took the time to put together these novels, whether they were good or bad, and you know what, my price point is limited just because I want it to be, for anything under $1. It's just crazy.
Well, I started the blog in January of 2013.
Oh,
I'd
wow.
probably been sitting on the idea for 4 or 5 months before that, when finally my roommate just basically hit me over the back of the head and said, if you're going to do this thing, do it. Because he was really interested in seeing what I came up with. So I had a ready set audience, and that was nice. And he managed to keep me going for the first several works when, I think book 3, the Genetic Bomb, was the first one that I almost threw across the room and said, no, I can't do this. This is an impossible task I've set for myself. But he kept me going. He wanted me to funnel the rage of a terrible book into the reviews. And I would say he definitely was the catalyst that got an idea from the middle of 2012 finally on the screen in 2013.
Interesting. And then how many books have you gone through that have been, well, how many books have you reviewed, I should say, since 2013?
It's in the 80s, maybe 85. I've done a book a week since then. I missed 1 week because I was moving, but probably 85, 86.
And these books aren't small. These aren't like the ones that you just simply flip through. They're probably at least 200-300 pages plus long.
Most of them range around the 200 page area. I actually have a spreadsheet where I keep track of page lengths, price I've paid, things of that nature, just because details like that interest me more than anything. Um, I've had a few that hit the 300 mark, and maybe one or two that were 400 pages.
Oh. What type of books have been, I guess, the cheapest buys, but have been the most surprising in terms of content?
That's generally the case. There have been books that I found for a quarter by people like Jack Williamson, who I look at it and I go, "This is a lost classic. This should not. This should have still be in print, at least, with a special anniversary edition by Doll Books and some hype on Amazon." At the same time, there have been the books that you read and go, it's not surprising that this book is forgotten because it's terrible. And most books fall in between those extremes and will be just really mediocre. There's nothing special except maybe a core of a good idea or a character who is decent. And there's nothing else to attract anybody's attention unless they're deliberately looking for that kind of book.
Interesting. Hmm. I guess what I find intriguing is the fact that these masters that we've all grown up on from the 60s, 70s, the Heinlein, the Asimovs, the um, whoever else I can't think of that I probably read that have had much press. Um, what is it that these forgotten authors did that stopped them from getting to maybe that master status?
That's a question I've wondered a lot. Sometimes it seems like it may have just been luck. They, and that seems to be the case with almost any industry. You can be talented all day long, and just the wrong person noticed you, or the right person didn't.
Hmm.
Um, in the sense that, I mean, Harrison Ford was a carpenter when George Lucas found him and said, "Hey, try out for this Han Solo part." Um, but then there are a lot of very common flaws that tend to crop up in books. Characters that don't have a lot of direction or a lot of, there's a word I'm looking for, agency, that's it, that tend to just watch the story unfold around them. Or characters that are just awful people. I read one book, I think I mentioned it already, Genetic Bomb,
Mm-hmm.
where the ostensibly the hero, part of his mission or the way he goes about it is that he, and this is probably a trigger warning, he forces himself on a woman to get information from her. And he's supposed to be our hero. But the classics that fall, or the would-be classics, tend to have they don't have quite the voice that somebody like Arthur C. Clarke has. They don't have quite the ingenuity that somebody else like Bradbury would have, the literary ingenuity of Bradbury. So they just fall by the wayside as not spectacular because there's so much that's great in the science fiction genre.
Do you hope that this particular site with Schlock Value, do you hope that you can maybe trigger the indie fan or the obscure fan that likes sci-fi but has gone through all those classics as you have, and kind of give them something fresh and new?
I would love that if somebody came back to me and said, I would never have read this author if I hadn't read your review of one of his books. Or even just the general inspiration of doing what I do. Like, I would love it if somebody came out with a parallel, because there's so much, but there's so many opportunities for other people to do exactly what I'm doing, and that wouldn't get on my nerves at all, unless they were a lot better than I am. So that's been probably a goal from the start, is just getting some publicity for some of the authors that I think were great and deserve a little more attention.
I'm looking through the site itself here, and you have a almost not quite a top 10 list, but you have your rankings list so far. You have Lost Classics, Like Them Despite Their Flaws, Pretty Meh. Love that title. That was great. And then Absolute Garbage. And your Absolute Garbage list is pretty much twice the size of your Lost Classics list. I mean, are we going to see like a 6 page or like a continuous scroll pretty much of these Absolute Garbage ones by the time you get done
I may have to find a way to break down that category.
into
Um,
subcategories?
but some of the most fun books have been the garbage books because I can sit around, I can be on the bus and just look over at the person next to me and say, "Can you believe what this guy said?" Or it gives me something to talk about, really, which is important. Like the books that are really meh are the ones that I dread because all I can say is the same thing I've said about a dozen other books. And I have to really pry into it to say, well, also, their spaceships were stupid. Haha.
I find it interesting that I see a Star Trek: The Next Generation and an X-Men as well on this particular list. Wow, that's not indie. That's like mainstream, isn't it?
That is, and I felt a little bit bad about it, but I've had that book for ages and was looking for an excuse to read it. I did pay a penny for it on Amazon,
Okay.
plus shipping and handling.
Oh, so you got screwed on the shipping and handling.
Yeah, it was like $4 total, which isn't that bad. Um, but there's an element of like, why did this get published? How is this acknowledged by the fan base at all? And why is it basically just fan fiction that got legitimized? And how do I get that job?
You're covering your microphone a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, that's better. Oh, you can tilt it down too.
Oop.
There you go. Much better. um, well, you know, it's interesting because I mean, are they looking to print money or are they looking to actually put out a story? It seems like it's more of a print money. Here's a book, buy it, and then we'll get paid.
Yeah, it definitely had a flair of the author was paid by the word because there were a lot of descriptions of things that, if you're a fan of either or both of those universes, you're going to be familiar with what Wolverine looks like. We don't need a description of his uniform.
It's like the goldenrod yellow was hinted against the sun of the fact that the blue tints of the gold of the sunrise as Wolverine smoked a cigar looking over at Storm.
And then Captain Picard, resplendent in his red uniform.
While Riker looked on in anguish, the fact that Deanna Troy still hadn't returned his calls. So you could just write one right now.
Absolutely. This sometimes I'm startled at how easy what these authors have done would be. And there's the question of why I haven't gone around and done that, but mostly it's because I'm having more fun making fun of them than trying to put out my own schlock.
Okay. Well, let's talk about you a little bit here. I mean, you said you're a writer. Besides the reviewing aspect, why are you passionate about writing?
I Writing for me has been a way of getting more of what I think about the universe out there
Hmm.
and maybe connecting with other people who think similarly. I say that, and I do very little actual writing. It's partly work ethic issue, but partly just I've never gotten around to really fleshing out a story. Like I come up with ideas for stories all day, and I'm sure plenty of people are like this. I'll be walking to the bus stop and I'll think, oh wow, what if magic was discovered in 1983? And that would be a fun idea to write, but
Be the
the
best
nitty gritty of
D&D game ever.
yeah, the nitty gritty tends to get past me. And when I started doing the blog, I was hoping that maybe being able to nitpick more than just admire a work would provide a look at the system one might develop in writing.
Hmm. Have you found anything that that has triggered that, or at least getting hints as to how things that are done badly could be done better?
The hints tend to be on a case by case basis where I'll think, okay, this idea was dumb, but I think it could have been better had the author developed a character better or not described the universe they created for 270 pages while shoehorning in a 3-page story. Um, so looking at the things that an author should avoid has been illuminating, definitely. But I still haven't gotten around to doing my own work based on those discoveries.
Hmm. Are you trying to write, an actual sci-fi novel, or are you just trying to get maybe like short stories kind of put together?
Short stories were probably my goal at first. There's so many opportunities for, even if a magazine or something doesn't pick it up, to self-publish on Amazon. This is something I talk about with my roommate quite a bit. And in fact, one thing we're sort of working out is compiling the first year or so of Schlock value, adding some content to make it worth paying for, and then throwing it on Amazon for $1 or $2.
That sounds actually very reasonable. I mean, it would be an interesting collection to put together. Like make it 100 pages, or do 100 reviews, put it up, and then do your next 100.
Probably the biggest issue we've been having is trying to figure out what to do about book covers, because I like to scan and put the book covers on the site.
Yeah.
And if I sold the content, I wonder if there'd be some copyright issues. And in the first year, there were 50 books. That's probably 20 publishers that I don't feel like giving a call, and some of them are defunct.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of issues to worry about.
I think in that regard, you just simply have to list the title, the publisher, and the content. You wouldn't necessarily need the images on the interior. You just need the heading and the title. At least that solves that aspect. In terms of your cover itself, I think, finding an actual graphic illustrator, which I think I could list a few for you as well, for a small fee, you could actually put together something that it would be a great brand to have, but also be something you could add for your website as well too.
True. One of the reasons I'd like to have the cover art from the books in the book is because I tend to comment on it.
Okay.
And some of the best books I found have just astounding covers. And
In the
there's
good sense? In the good sense or the bad sense?
Both. There was, oh gosh, what was the book? Machine of Death was a book I did early on. Terrible title. The cover looked ridiculous. It was probably the first book I read where I said, wow, this book really needs attention because it is fantastic.
Interesting. I'm going to have to read that review now.
There was a similar one called Legion of Space. That one was by Jack Williamson. And it had a just awful cover of like an astronaut and a big glowy green tentacle. And I thought, this is going to be awful. And it was another one where I just said, this is astounding. And I'm now legitimately a fan of his work.
Wow. That's crazy. Have you done any conventions? Have you promoted your site to any of the forums, use groups, anything like that to showcase, hey, here's something unique and different?
It's not really something I've done. I'm abysmally bad at self-promotion, for one thing. Most of my promotion tends to go through Twitter or Facebook, so my mom knows that I'm doing something. And things of that nature. Sometimes I think I should maybe pick up an ad space on Project Wonderful.
It's not that useful anymore.
Is it not? It's good to know.
Yeah, don't waste time for that. It used to be great 5-7 years ago, but
Yeah.
it's not spectacular now. Same with Project Wonderful. Google Ads, what is it, AdWords or whatever it is somewhat better, but I think the word of mouth aspect that you're going for is a great start. It's just it's like a job, unfortunately. You have to do it every single day and keep yourself active with your fellow fans and all that other stuff too.
Definitely. Even something like posting on a website. I'm sure there are people on something like excuse me, but people on Something Awful or places like that who would be interested in follow back. In fact, probably the biggest push I ever got to viewers or readers, etc. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Has been somebody else posted on Reddit a link
Nice.
to the site, specifically one of the reviews of The Feminists. Oh goodness, that book. A horrifying future where women have taken over and men are relegated to cattle. Somebody posted
Sound,
that. Pardon?
that sounds like an episode of Sliders, actually.
But somebody posted that to Reddit. I got a bunch of views, and then one of the Redditors found it and put it on their blog. We Hunted the Mammoth, I think, was that blog. They deal with issues of misogyny and the pickup artist culture and things of that nature. And for a while there, I didn't know what to do because I was getting so many views that WordPress was like, "Hey, you're doing awesome. Keep going."
Usually when that happens with me, it crashes. But yeah, it's. But you talk about some of the themes actually, which is rather interesting because with the variety of books that you've reviewed, you've gone from many different generations. The generations between the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, you know, the cultures are vastly different depending on the decade that you reviewed them in. What's the most common theme, I guess, throughout the years that kind of strikes a chord with you?
A lot of the books deal with the Cold War, or either implicitly or explicitly. And for a while I was getting tired of, oh, it's another book about the Cold War. But as it's gone on, it's given me a really good look at the mentality of the time period. Because I was 6, I think, maybe 7 or 8 when the Soviet Union fell, so I didn't really deal with a lot of that growing up. And so it's astounding just how much it was in the collective consciousness, probably across all genre. I'm sure there are many, many romance novels that deal with Cold War issues. And so it's been a very interesting way of getting into that mentality, of seeing what it was like without just going up to somebody and saying, what was it like?
Back in my day, we didn't have potatoes.
It was duck and cover every day.
Well, then let's the opposite end of that spectrum. Then what's the most awkward theme that you've seen occur repeatedly when you've been reviewing these books?
Anytime a book deals with issues of sexuality, it tends to get kind of squicky. There have been some excellent books, science fiction or otherwise, that have dealt with those issues. Heinlein springs to mind, Theodore Sturgeon, and so forth. But so many times I'll get a book where it claims it's going to be about, exploring sexuality, but really it's just adolescent and stupid. There was, like I mentioned, the hero who forced himself. There's another book, I, Weapon, wish I could remember the author, where basically humanity has split into a whole bunch of different sort of subspecies that are vastly different, and our hero, instead of doing what he's supposed to be doing, saving humanity, is basically having sex. And it's really weird. But probably my favorite one that claimed it was going to deal with sexuality, more in it was a sex comedy kind of book, was called All Right, Everybody Off the Planet. And it emblazoned all over the front cover, the back cover, that this was a sci-fi sex comedy and it's going to be hilarious. And there was nothing. There was a smooch, I think, at maximum. And I had to wonder why the publisher felt the need to completely obfuscate what the book was about in an effort to sell it. I'm sure it was money, but it was weird.
The things publishers will do to get a book out there.
Oh goodness. I read one book that was a reprint of a book that came out before Star Wars. The cover I had basically had Luke Skywalker on the cover because that edition came out after Star Wars.
Oh, yeah. Go figure. We only have a couple of minutes left here, but is there any questions that I haven't? Oh shit, disconnected. I didn't do that, guys. Sorry about that. He did say he was having internet issues, but I'm sure he'll come back on, no problem. Little awkward there. But while we're waiting, don't forget, of course, you can go to our website, tgtmedia.com.
So
There he is.
that my phone just crapped out on me.
I was going to say, it's like, I was asking you a question, and then it's like, and he dropped. Well, shit, that sucks.
Oh, it claimed my phone was overheating. That's interesting. I've never seen that warning before.
Well, as long as your hand doesn't catch on fire or your gel cover doesn't melt to your phone, you're perfectly fine. And now, if you can take your battery out, like I can't do with my stupid Nexus phone, well, but it is heating up the change I have on my desk, so that's a good thing to do. So what I was asking, what I was saying was, I'm not sure what you heard, but is there anything that I haven't brought up that you'd like those that are watching and listening to this show to know about? Not only but maybe about yourself, but about your site as well.
Well, mostly I want to say visit your local library. Within the past month or two, I've gotten a job at Knox County's library system, and I really want to push libraries. I love them. I have yet to dig up any of my reviews from the library, although I have a list of potentials. But I want people to go to their library and hit up the section that they like and find somebody they've never heard of. It's a nice free way of expanding your mind, your interests, any of that nature. And I've been doing that by paying for it, $1 a book at a time, or sometimes as low as a quarter. I think I spent 15 cents on one book. But now that I'm at the library, I really want to push that sort of, you can check out the newest, what is that one, Diane Gabaldon? You can check out her newest one as many times as you want, but maybe look at the one next to it and see what it's got going for it. And then write a review of it.
There you go. I think that's amazing. It's been a while since I've been to my local library. It has been a while since I've been to my local library, and I have returned all my books, so I don't have any late fees, so I'm good about that. But it would be good to go back because I think a lot of people don't understand that the library isn't Wikipedia.
Right.
So let's do a Google Map search in your area. Type in library. That's Library.
Some people pronounce it library.
Sorry, Canadian. We have to enunciate.
Yeah.
But go to your local library. It's free. It's amazing. It's a free service that you get a library card. You sign up books for X number, I think it's up to a week or 10 days or however much it is. It's been a while, and just take the time and like Tom said, find a section you love, and take out 3 to 5 books and actually spend a weekend and read them and then return them. No, really, you do have to return them because other people want to read them. So
hopefully, anyway. Find somebody else who wants to read it and tell them.
Exactly.
That's the most fun you can have with a book, is finding somebody else who wants to read it, or might want to read it who didn't know they wanted to read it.
And it'll be amazing what you find, what worlds you'll explore, and you may find a passion that you never realized you had as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I hate to say this, Thomas, but it's the end of the show. It's crazy. Time.
My clock jumped 30 minutes, and I don't know how it did that.
Time travel. Like TGT, yes, we finally can master time travel. Woohoo! But sorry, but other than that, though, I do want to thank you for taking the time to do this and for coming on the show and expanding our knowledge and minds about a great site, schlock-value.com, and truly it's something that everyone should look at, and I hope they take the time not only to read your reviews, but to comment as well and to maybe suggest some books as well that they might have found that struck
I
a
loved
chord
it
with them
definitely.
too.
Um, some of the best ones I found were based on suggestions. So if there's anything anybody wants to, if they read it or if they've been looking at it, maybe dreading reading it, then definitely title, author in a comment section, and I will do my darndest to find it.
That's awesome. That's great news. Well, I, well, basically what I'm going to say then is I'll just do the closing aspect here, and just bear with me a couple minutes, and we'll get right on it. But like I said, that's this episode of Two Geeks Talking. Of course, you can find Thomas's work at Schlock, which is SCHLOCK value.com. Since, like you said, since 2013, it's amazing what content he has and what you're going to pick up. So take a look at his stuff, tweet his work, Facebook, do all the social media stuff to help promote it. And Reddit as well too is very useful for that in that regard. So help them out that way. As for myself, of course, that ends this episode. I'm your host Kurt Sasso, of course, from Two Geeks Talking. There's my Twitter right there at Kurt Sasso. Facebook is the same for facebook.com/. Two Geeks Talking. That's the word two, not the number two. Our YouTube page is youtube.com/TGT Media. And of course, tune in for the next episode with another great and talented person on the show, Two Geeks Talking. I'm your host, signing off. See you next episode.